The knock came just after sunset, sharp enough to cut through the hum of my apartment. When I opened the door, I froze. My mom, who'd walked out when I was 9, stood there smiling like she'd never missed a thing. Beside her slouched my half-brother Caleb, thumbs tapping his phone sneakers already over my welcome mat. "I heard how much you make now," she said, eyes sweeping the room. "Family helps family." Caleb smirked. 60 grand for tuition, 3,000 a month. You can handle that." I felt my pulse in my ears. I didn't argue. I just knew this wasn't a visit. It was a raid. I grew up in a small Ohio town where the winters felt longer than they should have, and the smell of fryer oil clung to my father's clothes every night. My dad, David Foster, ran a tiny diner on the edge of Main Street. It wasn't fancy 3 red booths, a flickering neon sign, and a coffee pot that never rested, but it kept us going. After Mom left, the diner became our lifeline. I was 9 when she walked out. No warning, no goodbye. Just the slam of a car door and the sight of her suitcase wobbling down the front steps. Dad told me later she'd met someone else, a man who promised her a better life. For years, I'd lie awake wondering if better meant a life without me. Dad tried to fill both roles, but he was already stretched thin. Every morning at 5, he'd unlock the diner and start the grill. By the time I came home from school, he smelled like bacon grease and black coffee, his fingers nicked from the slicer. Yet, no matter how tired he was, he'd still sit across from me at our wobbly kitchen table and ask, "How was math club today?" Sometimes he'd doze off mid-sentence and I'd just smile and whisper, "It was good, Dad." Money was always tight. The lights flickered whenever the heater kicked in, and there were weeks when the fridge held little more than milk and half a jar of jam. I started babysitting at 12, stacking shelves at a corner store by 14, and cleaning houses by 15. Every dollar went to rent groceries or gas for Dad's rusted pickup. He'd scold me. "You shouldn't worry about bills, Jess," but I'd shrug it off. Worrying was the only way I knew to help. School became my escape hatch. Numbers made sense when nothing else did. I joined math club, entered competitions, stayed late to tutor other students. When teachers talked about college, I listened like it was a secret world I might break into. At 17, I earned a full scholarship for data analytics at a state university. The night the acceptance letter came, Dad cried at the diner's counter, wiping his eyes with a dish towel. "You're getting out," he said, voice shaking. "You're gonna make something bigger than this." College was hard, but it was mine. Tuition was covered, but food rent and books weren't. I worked mornings as a waitress, afternoons at a law office, and nights cleaning offices. My schedule was a blur of bus rides, cheap instant noodles, and lectures. I'd come home, exhausted hands smelling of disinfectant, but I felt free. I was building something on my own terms. By graduation, I had a degree, a job offer, and a quiet fire inside me. I moved to Orlando for a data analyst position at a growing tech company. The first paycheck felt surreal, more money than my dad ever made in a month. I sent him $500 right away, then more whenever I could. He hated taking it, said I'd earned it for myself. But I wanted him to rest, even just a little. Years passed. Promotions came. I bought a sleek apartment, downtown floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city lights I used to dream about. My co-workers became my second family lunches with Nina from accounting, volunteering with Kara on weekends, sharing coffee runs with Ryan, the neighbor who always carried 2 mugs. Still, there were nights when I'd open a drawer filled with old birthday cards from Mom. Every one of them the same happy birthday. "Hope you're doing okay." No love, no warmth, just proof that she still existed somewhere living a life that didn't include me. I'd stare at those cards and wonder why I wasn't enough for her to stay. So when she suddenly reappeared at my door that autumn evening, smiling like nothing had happened, it felt like the ground shifted beneath me. I had built everything from scratch, career, peace, purpose, and now the ghost of my past had found the address. The day after that knock, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom's smile and Caleb's smirk bleeding into the glow of my doorway. Part of me wanted to believe she'd come to apologize, to bridge the 23-year canyon between us. But the way she'd said family helps family played in my head like a taunt, not a plea. By morning, she'd texted, "Lunch, my treat." There's so much to catch up on. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Curiosity won over instinct. Maybe I needed to hear her out just once to close the book properly. We met at a crowded cafe near my office. The smell of espresso clung to the air, chatter rose and fell like static. I spotted them immediately, Mom in a floral blouse that looked too new for someone barely getting by. Caleb slouched beside her AirPods and scrolling his phone. She stood when I arrived. "Julia, honey." "You look amazing." Her hug was stiff, perfumed, and foreign. I sat opposite her, careful not to meet Caleb's eyes. Mom started with small talk traffic weather my hair. Then, in a practiced sigh, she shifted tone. "You know your father made it impossible for me to stay in touch." The words slid out smoothly rehearsed. He shut me out completely after the divorce. I blinked, the heat rising behind my ribs. "That's not true," I said quietly. "He begged you to call. I was there." She looked wounded, then waved it off. "I did what I could." "I was struggling too, Julia." "Life hasn't been easy." Caleb finally looked up. "We've had it rough," he said, voice dripping sarcasm. "Dorms, cheap cars, it's not fun." He laughed like it was a joke. Mom patted his arm, turning back to me. "Caleb's tuition is $60,000. We just need a little help getting started, maybe $3,000 a month until he's settled." I set my coffee down slowly. $3,000? A month? She smiled, eyes shining as if she were asking me to lend her sugar, not a small fortune. "You're doing so well, sweetheart. You make more than you need." I felt the air thin. "How do you even know what I make?" She froze for half a second, then recovered with a flutter of her hand. "People talk. Old friends, you know." I stared at her, realizing she'd done more than hear things. My father's voice echoed in my mind. "Keep your accounts private, Jules. Some people only see what they can take." Caleb leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You're acting like we're strangers," he said, smirking. "You're our family. You should want to help." I swallowed hard. "I am family. But that doesn't mean I'm a bank." Mom's smile faltered. "You don't have to be cold, Julia. We came to you not out of greed, but because we trust you." There it was, the manipulation wrapped in sentiment. I'd seen it before in the eyes of customers trying to guilt Dad into free meals. I pushed my chair back. "I'll think about it." Caleb rolled his eyes. "Yeah, sure you will." Mom's voice sharpened, almost scolding. "Don't forget who raised you." That stung more than I wanted it to. I grabbed my bag. Heart pounding. "Dad raised me," I said, and walked out before my voice could break. Outside, the Florida sun felt too bright. I stood there on the sidewalk trembling, realizing that lunch hadn't been about reconnection at all. It was reconnaissance, and deep down, I knew they'd be back. 2 nights later, they showed up again. No call, no warning, just another sharp knock that rattled the door. I hesitated before opening it, praying it was a delivery. It wasn't. Mom stood there with a paper-thin smile, Caleb behind her holding a takeout cup like he owned the place. "We were in the neighborhood," she said, brushing past me before I could respond. The smell of her perfume filled the apartment, artificial and invasive. Caleb dropped onto my couch, sneakers on the rug, scrolling through his phone. "Nice place," he muttered. "Could use a bigger TV, though." I bit down a breath. "Why are you here?" Mom glanced around, her eyes lingering on the framed degrees and city view. "I just thought we could talk again. I don't want tension between us." "Then stop asking for money." Her smile tightened. "Julia, please. You have so much, and Caleb's trying to build a future. You can't understand what it's like scraping by." I crossed my arms. "I do understand. I lived it." Caleb laughed. "Yeah, but you're fine now." "So what's the big deal?" Mom shot him a look, then turned back to me. "Just a little help. $3,000 a month isn't much to you." Something in me snapped. "How would you know what's much to me?" Her eyes flicked sideways. "I heard things. I know your salary. I know you can afford it." My stomach turned cold. How do you know that she didn't answer? Instead, she glanced toward my desk. Caleb followed her gaze. "Stop," I said, too late. He was already there, fingers tapping my laptop's touchpad. My financial dashboard glowed on the screen open. My pulse roared in my ears. "What are you doing?" Caleb didn't flinch. Just checking how rich you are, he said with a smirk. Mom's voice cut in syrupy but sharp. We're family Julia. Why hide anything? I slammed the laptop shut so hard the sound echoed. You went through my things. She crossed her arms, tone hardening. Don't be dramatic. We just wanted to see how you're doing. How I'm doing? My voice cracked. You hacked Dad's email to find out where I work. You broke into my life again. Her face paled. Don't blame me for your father's failures. I had to know you weren't wasting your potential. Caleb snorted. He's a loser anyway. You're better off without him. That was it. The room blurred. I could hear my heartbeat like thunder. Get out, I said. Mom blinked. Excuse me. Get out before I call the police. Caleb stood muttering. You're insane. Mom's face twisted, anger breaking through her mask. You'll regret this, Julia. One day you'll need us. I opened the door, voice steady. I've needed you for 20 years and you weren't there. They hesitated, then left. The door clicked shut behind them. Silence filled the room, heavy electric. For the first time, it didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like freedom sharpened into resolve. I didn't cry that night. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the laptop they'd touched. The anger wasn't loud anymore. It was cold, razor sharp. All those years I'd believed silence meant peace. Now I understood silence could also be a weapon. I opened my laptop and began to trace what they'd done. My work as a data analyst had trained me to notice patterns, irregular logins, timestamps, footprints that people thought they'd erased. Within minutes, I found a forwarded email from my father's account to Mom's. The subject line was my full name. Attached was a payroll summary I'd sent Dad months ago when helping him file taxes. The forwarding had happened 2 weeks earlier from an IP address I didn't recognize. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. I printed everything, organized it in a folder, labeled it evidence. Then I called Dad. He picked up after the second ring, voice gravelly from years of coffee and late nights. Hey, kiddo. Everything okay, Dad? I said softly. Did you send Mom my salary info? He paused. No, I'd never. Then realization hit. She's been in my email, hasn't she? I could hear him exhale, tired and sad. That woman never learned boundaries. I felt the tightness in my chest ease a little. I'm handling it, Dad. I just needed you to know. The next morning, I called Mark Sullivan, a lawyer one of my co-workers recommended. His voice was calm, efficient. I told him everything from the hacked email to their visit to my apartment. He didn't flinch. You have proof. Yes, I said, sliding the folder across his desk later that day. He flipped through the pages, nodding. Then we'll file for a restraining order, and you'll want to inform your bank's fraud department. Hearing those words felt like breathing clean air after years of smog. Someone finally understood that this wasn't family drama, it was violation. By that afternoon, I'd changed every password. I had set up 2-factor authentication on everything, even ordered new security locks for my door. The next morning, I went to court. I remember the sterile smell of the hallway, the low murmur of other cases being heard, the sound of the clerk stamping the papers. Thump. That sound felt final. For the first time, I wasn't the scared kid watching her mother drive away. I was the adult drawing a line she couldn't cross again. Days later, my phone buzzed with an alert from the bank. Unusual transfer attempt, $10,000 from savings account. Declined. I stared at it for a long moment, then laughed quietly. She'd tried again and failed. I forwarded the notice to Mark. He replied within minutes, already covered by the order. They'll face consequences if they try again. The satisfaction wasn't the vengeful kind. It was measured calm, like closing a book that had been left open too long. A week later, I went for dinner at Dad's diner, renovated, now clean and bright after I helped him pay off the debts. The smell of grilled onions and fresh coffee hit me the second I walked in. He looked up from the counter and smiled. You look lighter, he said. I am, I told him. And I meant it. That night, back in Orlando, I watched the city lights pulse below my window. For the first time in years, I felt completely safe. My mother had taken enough from me, my childhood, my trust, my peace. But she wouldn't take my future, so I poured another glass of water, opened my laptop, and started building something new, a small charity fund I'd dreamed about for years. I named it the Foster Fund for kids raised by one parent fighting their way up just like I had. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. My own quiet way of saying you can't take from me anymore. A full year passed before I heard her name again. By then, the restraining order had long been granted, and my life had rearranged itself around peace. The mornings were quiet coffee-brewing emails waiting sunlight spilling across my apartment floor instead of anxiety. One evening, Dad called while I was driving home. "You'll never guess who reached out," he said, his voice careful. "Your Aunt Ruth." I smiled. "Haven't heard from her in years. She wanted to talk about your mom," he added. "Aunt Ruth and I spoke the next day." Her voice was low, worn with regret. "Marie's burned every bridge she's ever had. She borrowed from friends, lied about you, said you refused to help. People finally caught on. She and that boy of hers moved out of town. No one knows where." I didn't feel triumph, just a strange stillness. "I hope she finds whatever she's looking for," I said quietly. Ruth sighed. "You sound like your father." After that, I let the silence close. I didn't need updates or apologies. What mattered was that her chaos could no longer reach me. Therapy helped me understand something I'd never been able to name, that my guilt for surviving was heavier than her betrayal. Dr. Brooks once told me, "You can't heal in the same story that broke you." I carried that sentence with me like a mantra. So I wrote a new one. The Foster Fund became official within months. Small scholarships for kids from single-parent homes, mentorship programs, tutoring nights. Kara, my friend from work, helped design the outreach. Ryan organized local sponsors. The first time I signed a grant check, I thought of the diner lights flickering in Ohio, of Dad flipping pancakes to keep the electricity on. The cycle ended there. Sometimes I still catch myself waiting for another knock on the door, but it never comes. The silence now means safety, not threat. Last Thanksgiving, Dad came to Orlando for dinner. We cooked together turkey mashed potatoes, laughter echoing through the apartment. As he raised his glass, he said softly, "You did good, kiddo." I looked around the table, friends, warmth, peace, and realized he was right. I hadn't just survived her. I'd rebuilt something better. The night of the Foster Fund's first anniversary, I stood on the rooftop terrace overlooking Orlando's skyline. The city buzzed below a hum of life and second chances. Dad was there smiling in his worn blazer, talking with Kara and Ryan. Laughter floated through the warm air, the kind I used to think belonged to other people. I looked up at the glowing sign, "The Foster Fund for Kids Who Fight Alone." It shimmered like closure made visible. In that moment, I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who waited by the diner window, hoping her mother's car would come back down that street. She never did, but maybe that was the point, because losing her forced me to find myself. I raised my glass and whispered, "This is family." Then I turned toward the camera, toward you. If you've ever had to draw a line to protect your peace, you're not alone. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when everything falls apart. If this story hit close to home, hit like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more real stories like mine. Your voice matters. Tell me yours in the comments.